I'm on the trail of spies in London, and I'm not talking about Hollywood stars, I'm talking about the real operators. Let Tim Forden-Moss explain more.
The hotel was bought in 2011 by an American property developer, an extremely nice gentleman, and a company very concerned with restoring the hotel to its former glory. It had run down quite a lot. So it went through a £30 million refurbishment, and when we started looking at the marketing, we investigated the history. And it turns out that the hotel has had an involvement, shall we say, with the secret services of this country and other countries for almost all its life.
What sort of names would people recognise, from the world of spies that have been connected with the hotel?
Going back to about the 1940s, I suspect one of the easiest ones is when Churchill decided to form the Special Operations Executive, which was done in July 1940. And it was formed in this hotel, and it had its headquarters here for about the first 9 months of its life, until it got much bigger and moved to certain offices in Baker Street. But in amongst the SOE, as it became known, Noel Coward figured quite greatly. Hardy Amis, who was one of the Queen's couturiers, he actually ran SOE in Belgium for quite some time. Ian Fleming, who was in naval intelligence at that time, used the hotel quite considerably. So those are the sorts of names that people might recognise. There are a very famous set of people called the Cambridge Five, who were Russian agents recruited in Cambridge whilst they were students in the 30s, and became known as the Cambridge Five as they gradually were ousted by the British secret services. But one of them, Kim Philby, and Burgess and Maclean became household names in the 50s and 60s as they were recognised and fled the country and spent their last days in Russia.
So where did they meet in the hotel, or did they have connections with any particular area of the hotel?
The offices that they worked in for some time had offices in this hotel. There was an M18 listening post in Petty France, just over the road. Artillery Mansions, which is behind me, over the Victoria Road, was also part of the SIS or MI6, MI5 officers. But during the war, obviously, they recruited more officers and they needed more officers, as in places where officers could meet. And they took over the 5th floor of this hotel. And they were stayed here throughout the war and up until about the late 50s. They had offices here.
What's the reaction of your guests when they find out that they're staying in a hotel of spies?
I think there's a great deal of interest to it, actually. One of the films, very recent films that is now on television, got a lot, is Bridge of Spies, which talks about Checkpoint Charlie and the swapping of spies and the trial of the spies in the US. We get lots of visitors from the US as well. But it's very hard not to be intrigued by some of the things that you can see in this display cabinet.
And I spoke to one visitor from Milwaukee. When did you first hear of the spy connection and the hotel?
I would say about 4 or 5 years ago. There were walking tours all over London. It could be Sherlock Holmes, it could be Harry Potter, it could be anything. This one was a spy tour, a real-world spy tour, as opposed to a James Bond or movie spy tour. And this features prominently in that walking route. We talked about the fact that it was legitimate history here, that British intelligence, at least during World War II, British intelligence really started out here as an anchor point. And ever since, I was looking forward to coming back here and just staying for a couple of days.
What was your reaction to the spying relics on display in the hotel?
Well, it's obvious they've done serious work, serious research on getting, for some of the exhibits, for example, they're real. They're real artifacts, and they have genuine history to them. They're not manufactured in some Disneyfied way, try to make it look like this was a espionage environment. They have real artifacts, real imagery, sheets of code, old weapons, all that kind of. And those are the great thing about that is those are in the lobby for anyone to come visit. You want to come have a drink, have lunch. Those are not off limits to you if you're in the lobby of the hotel.
Tell me about the display in the lobby.
But some of the things in here, so for example, this FP Liberator pistol, it was manufactured by the US. They manufactured them in their millions. They were meant to be and were distributed to resistance movements across Europe. They have 1 bullet in the chamber and 5 in the butt, and they were meant to be used at close quarters and then thrown away.
And behind you, you have the uniform of the women's part of this organisation, the Fanny.
Behind me is the uniform of the Fanny, the First Aid Nursing Yeomanry. They were formed in the First World War actually, and are called Nursing Yeomanry because originally they were mounted. They were nurses who rode around the front lines nursing. They played a great part in SOE because women agents were greatly prized, and they were often able to get into places and to do things that men weren't able to do. And I think over the course of the war there were well over 100 female agents for SOE, and about a third of them lost their lives.
Do you know if any spies still use this hotel?
We would expect so, but to be honest, if they're any good, we wouldn't know, would we?